A very good afternoon to all the viewers. Welcome back to another episode of BW People HR Voices. Today we have with us Mr. Deepnarayan Tripathi, the Group Head HR at the Tenon Group. Prior to Tenon, he has held key leadership positions at Barclays, Concentrix, United Lex, Melora, and Lenskart. His expertise lies in talent acquisition and management, leadership and organizational development, and also culture change, which makes him a well-rounded HR leader. He's also a certified life and executive coach from Ericsson International and also a certified facilitator on multiple world-recognized learning initiatives. Just to name a few, situational leadership, crucial conversations, and a certified competency mapper and assessor. Firstly, welcome, Mr. Tripathi. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Savi. Thank you for having me here.
So for all the viewers, today's conversation is going to revolve around understanding the role of middle managers in driving organizational excellence. So firstly, Mr. Tripathi, I want to understand from you, how would you define the middle layer of management? What are some of the key responsibilities that they entail? What are your views on this?
See, it's a very industry-based question, to be honest with you, right? So, I'm going to share what I understand as far as, the layers of leadership are concerned. So there are multiple theories, but if I were to look at the overall leadership ladder, there are three typical ladders. The first one is what we typically refer to as line managers. Now, line managers are what you would term as a floor supervisor, or the first line of people who are managing people who are delivering the job, right? So for a manufacturing unit, let's say this is a production supervisor, or for a logistics chain, it is the first person who's handling a bunch of people, or a bunch of sales executive, or a logistics executive. And then comes the middle layer. Now, the middle layer is anywhere between. Okay, let me just talk about the executives. So the executives are the people who are making key decisions. So these are typically your boardroom guys. So either directly sitting out of the boardrooms or having access to the boardrooms. In between this, everything is a middle layer leadership, and it differs. So for example, in a retail, even an area manager who's managing a bunch of stores is a middle layer manager. So, and above them, say anybody up to a retail head, just below a retail head, is a middle layer manager. So typically the person who's involved in the decision making, but doesn't take the decision, but whose key job is to ensure that the decision gets implemented. Anybody who's in this role is what I term as a middle manager.
Right. Thank you so much. You've given an overview of all three layers of management. So we know that the middle managers, they serve as a bridge between the top executives, the C-suite leaders, and the frontline managers and the employees, the frontline employees. So what are some of the typical challenges? I would want to know about the challenges that they face in this role, and how do they overcome these? What specific skill sets do you think they have that help them take better decisions and overcoming these challenges?
Fair. See, I guess, I missed out the second part of your first question, which was really asking me what are the critical responsibilities that they have. And one of the responsibilities you already mentioned, Savi, I love that, right? That, the easiest way to put across what is the most significant part that a middle manager does is acting a bridge between the executives and the last layer of the management. Right. So that's really the first and the most important responsibility. So in essence, these are the guys who are converting the vision into reality. So, there is a lot of stuff that gets discussed on walls and on PPTs and on great stuff. But ultimately, the guys who actually get it done are these middle managers. So that's the first part of the responsibility. Anything that is an organizational goal. So, every year, every organization, small or large, old, new, startup, would take a target. The targets get discussed in a room, right? And they just get reviewed in a room on a weekly or a monthly basis. But the people who are ensuring that they keep an every day, at times even an every hour track, especially in a sales sort of an environment, are the middle managers. So this is the other area of responsibility. So they are the ones who are handling the day, the bits and pieces that actually make the whole. The other big responsibility that I often seen these guys deliver is, design actions and deploy actions that drive efficiencies and reduce wastage. So, from a large scale, there'll be a directive. They'd say, hey, you know what, we've got to cut down costs by X and we've got to increase efficiencies or production by Y. But there is not a huge amount of specific set of actions that are given out to these bunch of middle managers. So these are the people who know, because understand, they know the pain on the ground. Somehow, and I'm not saying that this is intentional, but somehow people sitting at the executive layers are too far away at times from reality. So these are the people who would actually change or, convert their vision, their goals, their priorities into actionables. And ultimately, Savi, whatever you say, but unless and until something is action, it is as good as a beautiful PowerPoint, as good as a beautiful whiteboard presentation. And the last but not the least, developing and driving the workforce, continuously holding up the morale of the workforce is where the middle managers come through, right? So if I have a workforce of about 20, 25,000 or even a 5,000 workforce, it's impossible for any technology or any, executive to drive it. The maximum that you can do is give rewards, but the rewards have got to be relevant. Right. And these are the guys who actually make it relevant. So I think these are the key responsibilities that a middle manager executes. And whatever limited time I spent in the HR fraternity, both as a learning and development person or as an HR leader, in my view, I think if this part of the organization, if this layer of the organization is strengthened and is strong enough, I mean, organizations can go places. And if there is a weak link here, we're really looking at trouble.
Right. So you mentioned that, or we can just say that the middle managers, they're the first ones to initiate any change or initiate any action at the organization, right? So whenever we also see that at organizations, employees, they face a little bit of resistance whenever there's a huge change, especially when new technologies are coming in, the business landscape is changing every day. So how can middle managers be helpful in this situation? How can they help the employees transition effectively during this phase?
Dekho, yaar, I think the problem, right, here has to be handled by two separate groups. One is the managers themselves, and the other is the environment that they operate in. So let me just split this apart for you and let me help you understand this. At times, what I've noticed is, so as we mentioned, change. So change a lot of times is driven from the top. It's almost a corporate jargon for people to say, hey, you know what, change is driven from the top. But when you say change is driven from the top, it essentially means that you've got to be a part of the execution plan of the change. But unfortunately, a lot of places, change is just rolled out. So how the middle managers have to contribute is the why behind the what is absolutely imperative.
Right.
You can't just say that this is what has changed. You have to help people understand the rationale, the logic, the reasons, the long term, the short term. Because, hey, you know what? Every change that I have ever come through, I have read, I've talked about to the other colleagues in the HR fraternity, has always had a reason.
Right.
But unfortunately, we have at times either deliberately or with no intent have failed to communicate the reason behind the change. And I think it comes from our age-old thought. Somehow we feel that people will not understand. And I'm telling you, you'll be surprised at how much people understand if you do make an effort. So I think what middle managers really need to do when a change is implemented is they have to say, hey, you know what? This is why it is changing, and stay in constant communication. The worst that a middle manager can do in a change environment is to leave a void or a vacuum. People will understand change. They understand change. They will accept it. You can't leave a void. So that's where the middle managers come through. Now, when I said there is the environment that the change is getting created in, this is where the organization comes in. So typically the executive leadership. The executive leadership has got to do exactly what I suggested the middle manager has got to do. So you can't expect a middle manager to deliver the goods unless and until you provide them with the tools, the processes, the systems, the authority needed to deliver that. And which is where the why behind the what is also imperative for the middle manager. So as long as organizations have faith in their middle managers and tell them that, hey, you know what, this is what we're changing. This is why we are changing. And here is the larger good that's going to come out of it. Maybe not in the short run, but in the long run. And we we have faith that they'd be able to do a similar job with their team members. I think change will not be that difficult a task, and people will accept it.
Right. So middle managers, they implement the changes which have been done by the executive board. But what are some of the skill sets that you would say are important for at this level of management for managers to have, because they are the ones who actually implement these initiatives at the organizations. So what skill set is important?
There's a lot of talk about how technology, and I may be from the old school, not that I'm not technology savvy. I'll come to that a bit, in a bit. But there's a lot of conversation on how the technology is changing, and how technology is changing leadership capabilities, and people will not need people, so on and so forth. Savi, the basics of people management, right? And this has gone on since the inception of humanity, I believe, right? It was documented maybe sometime later, but the basics of managing or leading a human being still remains the same.
Right.
You talk about any layer of leadership. So if we want to list it down, this will sound repetitive because you do one Google search and these are the top 4 or 5 things that you will get. But actually, there is no substitute for basics like just being self-aware, emotionally intelligent, empathy, social skills, not staying away from people, just being there whenever they need you, building relationships. So these are age-old management practices that are still absolutely relevant and true. And that holds good for the middle managers today. Now, some of it is innate. It's a part of your upbringing. It's a part of your DNA. When I say DNA, the environment that you've grown up. But a large part of this today is something that you can acquire. So the middle managers really need to be focusing on basics of human leadership. Like, I already mentioned, right? Empathy, handling people, handling conversations. I mean, there is nothing more important and as simple as handling a conversation. But unfortunately,
I'm sorry to cut you down on this, but do you think constant upskilling, training, awareness programs, all of this is important?
So I was about to come to that. So, now I come to the technology part, right? So, which is where the new age, the new old, the new age systems and processes are coming into place. Technology is getting, I don't know, new and challenging. There are words, podcasts, loads of stuff on the news and the internet and everywhere. So the one thing that the middle management today cannot afford to do is not be up to speed with everything that's changing, right? So while there is no substitute for the age-old things, they have to be adopting and using technology for their day-to-day usage. And the second part, whatever business that they are a part of, they have to keep themselves updated and abreast about what's happening. So you can't be sitting and waiting for something to hit you. So there has to be a proactive effort on every middle manager's part. If they are, they are serious about not only helping their current role, but also aspirational to go ahead and move on to senior leadership roles, they have to constantly upskill about their own business, about business in general, upskill about technology, upskill about what the workforce is doing as of today. Because, imagine somebody like me, right? I will have a varied workforce. I'll be managing a person who would probably be my peer group in terms of both age as well as the schooling time and college. So, same around the same time. And then I'll be managing somebody, or I'll be leading somebody who was born in the 2000s, right? The Gen, what do you call them? The Gen Zs.
Gen Z? Yes.
Gen Zs, as you call them, right? Yeah. So I have to upskill myself in terms of what do they want? Because if I don't, I can't choose my reportees. I can't choose my team members. I'm sorry. So I have to handle that in order for me to be successful at what I'm doing today, plus, grow up to the next layer of the leadership. So upskilling, well said, absolutely imperative.
So you just spoke about that middle managers, they act as or they serve as a talent pool for future leaders, right? So how do you think, what strategies can be employed to nurture these middle managers into these roles? And as an HR head yourself, how are you contributing resources, or how are you, what is your contribution towards nurturing them into future leadership roles?
Perfect. See, I think one part we've already talked about, right? So a large part of upskilling, a large part of becoming a future leader or being, moving into it, if you were to go back to my grading or, my ladder, if they were to reach out to, or they're expecting themselves to be growing up to the executive ladder, they'll have to invest in themselves. And there is no substitute for that. And they'll have to figure it out. And, in today's day and age, Savi, it's hard for me to come across somebody. In fact, even if people say this, I really find it very difficult to digest that I don't have enough resources to grow myself, right? Because I know if this is not the age of information technology, if this is not the age of readily available information, which one was that, right? So that part being aside. Now, coming to organizations. So if I talk about myself as an HR leader, or I talk about organizations, I think we've got to make a conscious effort. The way that we've got to deal with this is identify, right, any leaders who have both the talent, which will be demonstrated in their performance on a day-to-day basis, and also assess if they have the inclination and the ability to grow up. Identify such middle managers sooner rather than later, because you've got to understand that there is a dearth of great talent in the market. They will be taken up. So I really need to ring fence them by investing in them, not in terms of monetary rewards or not in terms of any special bonuses or allowances, but in terms of investing in them and showing them a clear picture that, hey, you know what? Here is what you've got to be doing over the next X amount of months or years. And here is how when I say I, it means the organization, I'm going to be invested in you. And this is where or how you will reach. This has to have a structured approach. And it is important for us to communicate it to the middle managers, because I know that a lot of organizations do this, but one area that they really struggle, or I would say fail, is communicating this at the right time. So, as an HR person for the last 8-9 years, since since I've been leading large scale teams, one of the things that comes to me is, suddenly a person would decide to move on, a middle layer manager. And I'd have all the leaders and everybody approach me saying, we've got to hold him back and all of that. And all that I asked them is, what were we doing till now, right? So we had to tell the guy, and then we go tell the guy, hey, you know what, we had large plans for you, or, we were going to hold you back. We were going to give you this promotion, this project. I think the more proactive we get with holding our, leaders at the middle layer, the better it will be, and the better we'll be equipped to have internally promoted, executive leadership.
Right, very well said. But Mr. Tripathi, when we talk about our theme, which is organizational excellence as well, what is the role of middle managers in contributing towards setting these performance expectations, providing feedback to the employees since they're closest to the lower management? And also, how do they build an environment of continuous improvement among their teams?
See, largely, right? When I say largely, at least the organizations that I have touched or I have been a part of, every organization has some sort of a mechanism to assess, measure, and deliver performance, right? Even at every employee level. So some sort of a performance management system is already in place. So for the beginners, all middle managers should first start having faith in the performance management systems within the organization, right? They have to understand, so there is this, I know, this will, I don't want this to come across from an HR person, because this is where the push and pull from an HR and operations world is, or a business world is, that there are conceptual ideas, there are theories which have been tested, proven for success, which we continue to talk about to all our management, including the middle layers. Let's say feedback, for instance. Continuous feedback mechanism is something that gets talked about a lot, but it cannot be implemented in letter and spirit, till the time the middle manager actually says, hey, you know what, this is something that I really want to do.
Right.
So they've got to learn the art and science of performance management, whether it is continuous feedback. So a lot of times my managers or leaders would think that, a conversation over a cup of tea or coffee was good enough for a feedback, if you've done a good job on that, because feedback is science. There are specifics that you've got to deliver, because a lot of times you have a lot of conversation without driving home the actual message. So continuous feedback mechanisms. If you don't know how to do it, reach out. There are people who can help you how to do that. Don't wait for things to go wrong. This is the other part. A large part of leaders struggle that they wait for things to go wrong. See, telling people that they're really doing a good job is as important as holding them accountable or telling them, hey, you know what, you did not do something right. So continuously tell people that they're doing the right thing. Stay with them, right? And just be there with them. That's how performance management is going to get driven, and that's how continuous learning is going to happen. And we've talked about this almost like a theme throughout the conversation. Role model the behavior. So if you start investing in yourself and you demonstrate, not like you don't have to be explicitly going out and going gaga that this is where I invested, but in a manner, if you are demonstrating to your people that at my layer of management, even I am continuously investing in myself, I think a lot of times people will get the hint and they'll start doing the same, or they not question you when you're trying to help them do the same thing. So I think role modeling the behavior, and that's pretty much it. But you're right. Performance of an organization, execution, middle managers. Otherwise, everything is on a PPT.
I completely agree with you on this, because I feel like today's scenario has completely changed. Employees, they're looking for recognition more than rewards. Yeah. So that's definitely something that middle managers do keep in mind. Also, lastly, I want to, for all the viewers, mostly our viewers are HR professionals, they're HR leaders and employees. What would be your last piece of advice to them?
HR has evolved, and if it has not, it has to. HR will not be successful if you're running an HR from a corporate office or a cabin. HR has to go on the ground. So HR has to be a part of business. I mean, we talked about, just a few minutes back, the bone of contention, or how, typically even today we get said, this is an HR gyan or an HR thing. And I don't blame the businesses for saying what they say, or people when they jovially talk about it, or they make a joke about it. I think somewhere we've also faltered. The scenario is changing, but my tip to the young HR professionals or anybody else who'd ever come across this is, be a part of the business. Solve the business problems. Keep the HR theories and the HR concepts aside for a bit. First, understand what is it that the business is trying to solve. Talk the business language. The moment you are able to do these two things, all the theories, all the concepts, all your learning is not bad. It's just not relevant. And for that to become relevant, start being in the business and start talking the business language. The moment you do that, you'll suddenly see a very different approach that a business leader would demonstrate towards you, because then they'll treat you as a partner, not as somebody whose job is only to hire, pay salaries, and exit an employee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tripathi, for joining us today. You've given us some great insights, and I definitely know that the viewers are going to love watching this video. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Savi. Thank you.